Well, welcome back for another week's analysis behind the news. Very interesting article in yesterday's New York Times. It starts off by saying China embarking on vast program of urbanization. And it goes on to talk about the goal of this urbanization is economic growth. Now what they're doing is taking farmers off the land and moving them into cities. According to this, the 12-year plan is for 250 million rural residents to be moved into these high-rise apartments like you see in the background of this photograph. And so they're taking people off the land, growing crops, living off the land by themselves, not beholden to anybody else, and moving them into high-rise apartments. Now, the ostensive reason for doing this is because what they're trying to do, they say, is to build an urban consumer base, that they need more people consuming more products, etc., and that will help boost the economy because the economy is faltering. Well, maybe if they stop using all that money to build these high-rise apartments that are empty because nobody wants to live there until they're taken off the land, they wouldn't be in dire straits. Of course, they don't. Their version of a downturn in the economy and ours are two different things. But I want to read you some paragraphs from this because it's a big two-page spread when you get inside. It's contradictory within the article itself. It says their modernization plan is to fully integrate 70% of the country's population, or roughly 900 million people, into city living by 2025. Now, they're talking about the people here that are taken off the land. Many are giddy at their new lives. They receive the apartments free, plus tens of thousands of dollars for their land. Now, keep in mind, they didn't own this land. Supposedly they're paid for it, even though they don't own it. It's a communist country, remember. But others are uncertain about what they will do when the money runs out. Aggressive state spending is planned on new roads, hospitals, schools, and community centers, which will cost upwards of $600 billion a year, according to economists' estimates. In addition, vast sums will be needed to pay for the education, health care, and pensions of the ex-farmers. Well, I guess you're supposed to forget this when you get to this point in the article because it says something that seems to be contradictory. Some farmers who have given up their land say that when they come back home for good around this age, they have no farm to tend and thus no income. Most are still excluded from national pension plans, putting pressures on relatives to provide. Well, either they do have a pension or they don't have a pension. Doesn't really elaborate. The coming urbanization plan will give farmers a permanent stream of income from the land they lost. Besides a flat payout when they move, they would receive a form of shares in their former land that would pay the equivalent of dividends over a period of decades to make sure they do not end up indigent. Now, they don't own the land, but they're paid for the land, then they get shares for the land. This doesn't make any sense. They either have pensions or they don't have pensions. China officially has a 53% rate of urbanization, but only about 35% of the population has an urban residency permit, or hukou. These documents lets a person register in local schools or qualify for local medical programs. In other words, if you're a voluntary individual from the rural areas and go into the city, you have to have a city permit. It's a work permit to be in that city at this point in time. And that qualifies you for school and medical programs. If you get caught on the street without that hukou, I hope that's pronounced right, it's H-U-K-O-U, hukou. If you don't have that on your person, you can be expelled from the city and put back into the rural areas. So this is a transitional thing that's going on right now of closing down these rural areas and moving them into these high-rise apartments. So they'll all be clustered into these new cities. In the United States, that's called Agenda 21. Now, for those of you who understand what that's all about, because Agenda 21 has the same program. Within all the literature on Agenda 21 is this idea of getting people to move in from the rural areas into urbanized areas of apartment houses, where, like in Europe, at the bottom of the apartment is all of these shops, bakeries, grocery stores, cleaners, you name it, and then starting on the second floor, that's all residency. So they're all huddled into these areas in the cities. Now, they say it is being done to boost the economy. Well, who's going to be growing the food? Are they going to be putting in these big collectivized farms? They don't mention that in this article. The biggest thing that I see in all of this is control. By this means, they will be able to control the people who in the rural areas have been giving them problems. There have been riots in rural areas and everything else. So if you can cluster them into government-controlled housing, you can control them better. So welcome to the communist workers' paradise. This is what's going on in China right now, and it's something that they want to produce in the United States through what they call Agenda 21. If you want to read more about this, go to our Agenda 21 webpage on this in our website. Another thing that's happened recently, according to the New York Times, is this woman went to Walmart and bought some Halloween supplies. Well, as she was opening up the box, this onion skin paper falls out, and it talks about a man who's been putting little pieces of paper in all of these boxes of Halloween decorations, trying to tell people, whoever they were, who were going to buy these decorations, that this is being done by slave labor. And he talks about the conditions in these factories where these people work. And I imagine that's what's going to happen with this urbanization as well. But the people who are being moved into these high-rise apartments are quite concerned about it, because they say, well, if you're young, you might be able to get a job at $150 a month, the equivalent of $150 a month. If you start to reach 40 or 50 years old, the factories don't hire you anymore because you're not nimble enough to do the work. So then what do you do? And so it is a big concern, and then when they do get jobs, it's slave labor type of existence. I'll repeat a story I told some years ago. My son-in-law has a mold making business, and they do extrusion molds of plastics for mostly the computer industry. And he was doing business with HP. One of the middle managers of HP visited his facility to see if they could do the work HP wanted them to do. And so in the course of the conversation, he said he just got back from China and was in a factory sort of, looking the situation over, and he just saw a big bay of women, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these women just furiously stuffing things into a little package. And he was marveling at how strong they were working, how diligent they were working, how fast, and everything else. And so they toured the factory, came back, and he looked at the bay and says, wow, these gals are really working hard. How do you do that? He says, well, he said, the reason they're doing that is because last week they didn't get paid. He said, well, what do you mean they didn't get paid? Well, they didn't meet the factory quota. In other words, it isn't how much work each person does, but it's how much work the whole factory does as to whether or not they even get paid. So there's no sick, there's no vacation. They have to produce a particular quota or nobody gets paid. Can you imagine the kind of peer pressure on a fellow worker if they're not keeping up? And that's what was going on in this factory. And so that's the kind of workers' paradise you have in this communist empire. That's the kind of thing that our businessmen are over there producing goods to go into Walmart, to go into Shopko, everywhere today. Pick up anything, you won't find it made much of anywhere but China. And your money, my money, when we go to the stores, pay for that. Sometimes we have no choice. We have to buy something from China. I know businessmen that held out for years not buying anything from China, but they said for us to keep the doors open, we have to start doing so. And it's helping this workers' paradise to the detriment of American workers ultimately. Until next week, we'll see you then.